It seems to me that the civil rights movement must now begin to organize for the guaranteed annual income, begin to organize.
The question arises, well, what other options did he have? Well, for me, I think one of the reasons why there's such a mental block for people is because we've all went to the same schools. We all graduated from the same schools. We all read the same textbooks. You know, we all understand how MLK was this good moral leader who came to, in a sense, deconstruct the way things were. The whole reason that we even lionize or popularize someone like a Martin Luther King, who, by the way, was an all-out Marxist, who didn't believe in God. He said so in his own papers, that he did not believe in the resurrection of the Christ. That's very strange for someone who professes to be a Christian pastor. He didn't write any of his speeches. His dissertation was plagiarized. Those in his inner circle, his speechwriters, were themselves communists. Stanley Levison was a treasurer for a communist front group in New York. Bayard Rustin was a communist. He's the one who taught Martin Luther King the strategy of nonviolence. He was a concoction.
I want to welcome you to The Question, where we do a deep dive into information and statements that have been made where many people find to be true or controversial. And the best way for us to do this is by asking questions. I'm your host and guide, Theron King T. Washington. Now, I want to make you aware that there will be times when my insight comes from a biblical perspective. Let's jump into it. So let's start off with some questions. Now, I'm going to give us 5 questions to look into, and we're going to look at some information to help us find some answers here. And along the way, I'll ask a couple more questions, but the questions I'm going to start us off with are, was MLK a Marxist? Did King want our government to resemble the Russian government? Did King use socialism to hide the fact that he was a communist supporter who was enamored by Marxism? How did King's views differ from some other Christian pastors like Joseph H. Jackson, for example? Was MLK's solution for the problem America faced with integration unconstitutional? Let's check it out.
To me, it's logically inconsistent to say that the slave master should be given due deference and have his positions analyzed with a sense of nuance. But the commie is once and for all and forever will be outside of the bounds of any type of respect and honor in terms of our political history.
Was MLK a Marxist?
I can certainly more so understand why a Southern Baptist preacher who is maybe 2 generations removed from slavery would be in favor of Marxism than I can the co-founders of BLM in 2016.
Did King want our government to resemble the Russian government?
I'm not saying I agree with King's economic philosophy, but I understand why he would have it.
Well, touche. But the reality is that Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights Movement served in America as a kind of Marxist Trojan horse. From the outside, it appeared to be moderate and pro-American.
This is a gift. We shall take it to the temple of Poseidon.
And it's for this reason that America accepted it. But when you look at the results that followed, which were intentional, an expanded government, various socialist policies, a heightened welfare state, the facts reveal that this wasn't ignorance, but malice. They quite literally wanted to Sovietize America. In a 1965 interview, Bettina Aptheker said that the American political landscape is the perfect one for communism because Americans believe that they live in a democracy.
Did King use socialism to hide the fact that he was a communist supporter who was enamored by Marxism?
Communist philosophy or socialism easily and has to adapt to the country in which it's taking place. In this country, there will never be socialism unless the overwhelming majority of the American people passionately want it, and want it so badly that they're going to go out and get it. It's one of the things that gets me so excited when I start thinking about the possibilities of socialism in this country. The civil rights movement has already begun to develop a certain program. It is revolutionary, and it is also, I think, much more democratic.
So you can democratize social issues, and you can, in a sense, pull out the heartstrings of America. They will then let their guard down, and they will democratize socialism into reality. And so I don't see Martin Luther King fighting against that. I see Martin Luther King as a participant in that, which is a subversive thing.
It seems to me that the civil rights movement must now begin to organize for the guaranteed annual income, begin to organize.
The question arises, well, what other options did he have? Well, for me, I think one of the reasons why there's such a mental block for people is because we've all went to the same schools. We all graduated from the same schools. We all read the same textbooks. You know, we all understand how MLK was this good moral leader who came to, in a sense, deconstruct the way things were. And there was no one else. No one else knew how to do it. But Martin Luther King, here's a guy who got it. And he was a Christian pastor, and he was all these things. Much of what we have learned about him turned out to be either false or inaccurate or, you know, a myth or what have you.
How do King's views differ from other Christian pastors like Joseph H. Jackson, for example?
Dr. J.H. Jackson, head of the largest Negro church organization in America, the National Baptist Convention USA, with nearly 7 million members, has warned constantly that communists are directing the revolutionary activities of the radical black power.
There were other people like Joseph H. Jackson who believed in the fundamental Christian gospel, not the social gospel, not liberation theology, the fundamental Christian gospel, the inerrancy of the scriptures, the resurrection of Christ. Like, he believed in those things fundamentally.
What is your feelings toward the new black theology?
Those of us who are Christians, we don't believe that you can have a theory of God based on color.
When I look at someone like a Joseph H. Jackson, he argued that to the extent that the white man doesn't give you a job, it's incumbent upon you to build your own businesses and to hire your brother and your sister and your neighbor, that you aren't begging someone else for a job. And so he didn't only talk about this, but he exemplified this. There were a bunch of sharecroppers in the South who were getting cheated by farmers. Jackson was the president of the National Baptist Convention. The convention bought 400 acres of farmland in the South, and they allowed these black sharecroppers to work the land for free. And to the extent that they raised money for their crops, they got to keep and pocket that money so long as they were saving that money to buy their own farmland, so they can move from sharecroppers to farmers and not have to depend on anybody else for their daily bread. The convention, under the behest of Jackson, did many of these things.
I don't believe.
When you look at his engagement in civil rights, it wasn't this same brand of civil rights that MLK was pushing, in that we vest certain unconstitutional powers in the federal government, which widens that power and, in a sense, usurps our rights as Americans. Because, you know, to Bob Woodson's point, we shouldn't have given the federal government the right to force businesses to integrate. Rather, we should have merely taken away the state's right to segregate.
Was MLK's solution for the problem America faced with integration unconstitutional?
Integration was never our goal. We never saw integration as a solution to the problems. We were seeking desegregation. And I think confusion on that point has continued to erode the collective self-confidence of the black community today. So integration was never an issue for me or for many others, but it was the issue that I think separated me from the civil rights movement.
Both the problem and MLK's solution are unconstitutional, says Bob Woodson, says Barry Goldwater, and many others, even Malcolm X, ironically.
Why did Malcolm X disagree with King's stance on integration? Any
effort to force integration upon whites is actually hypocritical. There's a form of hypocrisy involved. If a white man puts his arm around me voluntarily, that's brotherhood. But if you hold a gun on him and make him embrace me and pretend to be friendly or brotherly toward me, then that's not brotherhood, that's hypocrisy.
Why did MLK get kicked out of the National Baptist Convention?
Now, the reason why I bring up Jackson in comparison to Martin Luther King is because, as you know, Ebenezer Baptist Church was under the umbrella of the National Baptist Convention. Martin Luther King, fresh out of Crozer, very young, very ambitious, he wanted to be the president of the National Baptist Convention. He was overwhelmingly rejected, and it got pretty contentious. Someone was pushed off a stage and died. Someone from Martin Luther King's little ilk pushed this young man off the stage and he died. So it got pretty contentious, and they ended up kicking Martin Luther King and his friends out of the National Baptist Convention. This was before his face was plastered on Time magazine and all the rest of it. So what they decided to do at the suggestion of Stanley Levison was start a new Baptist convention, which would rival the National Baptist Convention. So they started the Progressive National Baptist Convention. Of course, it didn't take off. It didn't do anything. So they started this Southern Leadership Conference. And then they moved from there to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and its concoction was the result of the fact that Martin Luther King and his campaign was not popular to these Negroes in the South as much as Joseph H. Jackson, who was a continuation of the kinds of things that Booker T. Washington talked about. Martin Luther King wanted to move the National Baptist Convention into a new, more radical, if I can use that word, social gospel, and to get away from the kind of fundamental gospel that Joseph H. Jackson and his ilk was preaching.
If you enjoyed hearing me ask questions and then having them answered by experts in their field, let me know by giving me a thumbs up. And if you have a question you want answered, please leave it down in the comment. Until next time, stay up, stay blessed.